Now, when it comes to watches in the more field or pilot style, there are a few models I generally recommend as some of the best options in terms of value. Now, today we're going to be looking at 3 entry-level field pilot style watches to mark the differences between 3 leading nations in regards to this style that you'll see at this entry-level position. So the watches that we're going to be comparing are the Orient Pilot from Japan, the Laco Augsburg out of Germany, here with the 39mm variant, and the Hamilton Khaki Auto from Switzerland. So what we're going to specifically look at is just kind of comparing these watches side by side, mark some of the differences as we go through them, and then also at the end just conclude when looking at all of them side by side for what scenario, what watch is the best for which type of person. So guys, let's jump into it. All right guys, now before we jump into this video, 2 important things. One is a giveaway opportunity. So if you want a free watch up to $1,500 or have the opportunity to win one, fill out the form down below, follow the instructions on the form by taking 3 links of 3 watches from teddybaldassarre.com, putting it in the form, and you'll be entered to win. We'll be announcing that winner here in the coming days or weeks. So just stay tuned, be subscribed here, as well as follow me on Instagram as we'll make that announcement in both of those places. And then also, if you're in the market for these watches, if you like what you're seeing here, we do sell all of them, but let's go through and take a little bit of some background and getting some information on all these pieces. Now, all 3 of these watches represent a style that I would classify as an everyday watch, some leaning more into the field watch category, some more into that pilot kind of Flieger style as well. But when I'm talking about an everyday watch, I'm talking about something that can be worn in a variety of circumstances with good durability, got legibility, and typically a reasonable level of water resistance as well. Oftentimes, and especially in the case of an everyday watch, it also makes sense to not break the bank if you want to have something that can really take a beating and you don't have to worry so much about in the day-to-day wear. And with that as a consideration point, it makes these watches that we're going to be looking at really make sense if you're looking at a watch in this direction. Now, typically when I do these comparison videos, I look at watches at different price points, and the improvements that you see as you start moving up are a little bit more apparent. But in this case, it's not really the same. So the details are going to be a bit more minute, but it still should serve as a nice baseline on what to look out for as you're looking at these 3 different examples. Now, for the sake of this video, we are going to be looking at a variety of different watches, first being from Orient, being a member of the Seiko Epson Corporation that typically is known for their more affordable dive watches as well as dress pieces, so something a little bit different from the brand. With a bit of a change of pace, we have Laco, a German brand with a history closely tied to the construction of Flieger-style watches. And then finally, Hamilton, a brand that is rich in experience and acclaim for their construction of military-issued field watches over the years. And I think it is important to note that this isn't just so apples to apples with all these watches and their overall points of emphasis in terms of their application, but I think they do, for the most part, sit nicely in both price, kind of ranging from $250 to just south of $600 in retail price. So I think there is something really attractive here. It makes a lot of sense to compare them because I can see many people looking in the direction of these as a great everyday option. To begin, let's start in the area where all 3 of these watches have relative similarities for the most part, and where the areas of difference are a bit more personal, and that is the area of wearability. Just to throw it out there here at the outset, these watches, all coming between 38mm and 42mm in their diameter, are great to wear, though even the slight differences between the watches do have an effect on the wrist. Now, starting with the largest of the bunch with the Orient Pilot. So we're gonna have a set of dimensions that occupies a fair amount of real estate with a diameter of 42mm, lug to lug of 49mm, and a lug width of 22mm with pretty reasonable thickness. Considering those dimensions, the watch does feel larger overall and might outsize some wearers. However, when you consider the obvious Flieger undertones in this piece and this design's original use case for pilots, and where typical Flieger watches during World War II were up to 55mm in case size, the larger case size does make a bit more sense when you put it into context there. Though it is important to note that this does offer the most substantial presence, but is executed in 11.5mm in thickness and does have a nice, for the price I would say, strap that comes with it, but I really would opt to go for some different strap options as well, as when you're dealing with a watch of this style, typically versatility is something that comes to mind. Moving on to the Laco Augsburg, and it's important to note that the Augsburg also is available in 42mm option as well, offering the best of both worlds for someone on the fence, with the dimensions of 42 mirroring closely to that was being offered with the Orient just mentioned. Now the 39 across the board is going to wear true to its size, with the thin bezel giving way to that dial there, and a rather slim case of 11.5mm with a compact lug-to-lug for its case size at just 46.5mm. This watch is also aided in its wear thanks to the above average vintage style leather strap, which is also made in Germany with large polished rivets near the lugs compared to the simpler Orient leather strap. It offers a bit more of an accurate depiction as well to the original format, with the rivets supposedly being used by pilots as a way to not have the watch slide around when in the cockpit, because for navigators and pilots what typically was happening is they were actually putting this over their gloves, flight jackets, so rather than the typical skin that you're going to have in a modern context. Wrapping up the conversation on wear, we also have the smallest and most expensive watch of our trio with the Hamilton Khaki Field Auto, which is coming in with a case size of 38mm in diameter with a pretty sizable 47mm lug-to-lug distance for that case size, and the thinnest of the cases at 10.5mm. Though a 38mm diameter can help at times feel a bit smaller, the prominent lugs on this piece though do help in terms of presence on the wrist and does edge out the Laco just slightly in terms of its size. It's worth noting here as well that if you like the look of this but require something larger, there's also a 42mm option of the Khaki Field Auto to check out as well. But if you're on the smaller to medium end in terms of wrist size, the 38 option is probably going to be the best option to go for, presenting a comfortable, versatile size that is only enhanced by the well-executed brown leather strap with contrast stitching, an area where I find Hamilton offers more than the usual expectation from other brands in this price category. And while all the leather straps on these watches are well done, especially factoring in the prices, this Hamilton strap as well as the riveted Laco strap do make the strongest argument in terms of quality and feel on the wrist. At least in terms of these leather straps, it seems like you're actually getting what you pay for as the price goes up. Given the similar design concept, use case, and affordable price point of these three pieces, the case finishing is executed in a fairly similar way across the board. When it comes to this Orient Pilot, it's important to mention again, we are talking about a watch that is at full retail only $265. Still, the circular brushing on top and the straight brushing of the case sides feels absolutely adequate, as do the somewhat stepped and brushed bezel and simple 90-degree angled lugs. Given the military styling on display here, the overall matte effect makes a lot of sense while also keeping an understated profile. While some may take issue with the inclusion of a mineral crystal, we are talking about a very affordable watch, and you do have a signed screw-down crown that is definitely a highlight of this Orient, enabling a more than capable 100 meters of water resistance on this watch that probably doesn't even need it, but it does make for an everyday watch argument even more powerful. All right, so now jumping over to Germany, we have the traditional Flieger design with the Laco Augsburg 39. Now we do have an overall sandblasted case with a general shape that is very similar to the Orient, and in keeping with the old school Flieger DNA to which Laco can make a very legitimate claim. Compared to the Orient though, this Laco has a push-pull crown and does come in an onion style variety to match the historical Flieger watches, and is rated for only 50 meters of water resistance, which is likely more than enough for most, but is substantially less than the Orient that we just saw. In terms of value, as you jump up to $410 in the price point, the case finish here does feel and look a step above the Orient, especially with the detail of the crown design, the surface treatment of the case, and the addition of sapphire glass on the front and the back with a layer of anti-reflective coating as well with that sapphire crystal, which really assists in visibility on the dial. Frankly, this case is pretty much finished on par with a lot of Laco Fliegers that are elevated in price around that $1,000 price point, and I think that's really why it makes this watch so compelling if you're trying to get into this Flieger design from a brand with really compelling history in this field. So rounding out our conversation on case finishing, we have the 38mm Hamilton Khaki Auto, which features a level of finish on the case that is similar to the other two, relatively speaking. With a circular brushed top and brushed sides, not unlike the Orient, the highlight of the Hamilton case is definitely the highly polished bezel, which contrasts well with the rest of the case in a sort of Rolex Explorer kind of way, while pulling the eye toward the sapphire crystal and field watch dial. Flipping this watch over, we do have another exhibition case back, and a good point about this one in terms of water resistance and when looking at the auto versions compared to, say, the Khaki Field mechanicals, is we do have 100 meters of water resistance, and I think has allowed this watch, of course, to become maybe the standard when it comes to entry-level Swiss watches for use in the everyday. But generally speaking, it isn't night and day between these cases, but the dials I think are a slightly different story. To start, it's fair to say that all of these watches feature strong dials for the respective prices, even in the case of the very affordable Orient. So this Orient Pilot has a black dial surface with bold printed elements whose original design dates back to watches used by German navigators in flight during World War II. So Type B style dials are when the outermost markings are going to be the minutes rather than looking at the traditional hour markings. And why this was used in the environment of flight navigators is minutes were more important than hours when dealing with different missions and tactics in the air. So being able to see at a glance what is going on was the added benefit here. This one also is going to feature some nice lume on the outskirts, but the lume here is pretty strong, as you might expect from this brand. Underneath the macro lens, this dial and its level of printing holds up pretty well, though the differences do start to emerge when comparing it to the other two more expensive options that we're gonna be looking at here today. Jumping up to the next price tier with the Laco Augsburg, we're treated to the other and arguably more popular Flieger design with a pretty much textbook Type A style dial. Now the sapphire crystal on the front with the AR coating certainly helps a great deal in accentuating the dial surface in this instance. It's defined by a triangle with two dots at noon, which is traditional for Fliegers, a minute track with prominent markings, traditional bold Arabic numerals, and a blued leaf style handset at the center. Now the Type A design has survived over the decades and still looks great in this modern Laco. Lume is in great supply and really powerful on the entire minute track, the hour markers, and the handset, making this a great watch for a nighttime viewing as well, whether in flight or on land. So that sense of history and brand equity, with Laco having been there with its design since its inception, gives this watch a little extra to go along with a clean level of dial execution and printing, which is just a bit finer compared to the Orient when viewed underneath the macro lens. Overall, this Type A is probably one of the most recognizable and, dare I say, iconic options on the market, while also looking a bit more refined compared to the many other tool field style watches out there. Moving up again to our top tier piece with the Hamilton Khaki Field Auto, we have a charmingly modernized execution of the traditional military design with a printed minute track at the outermost edge, lume hour indices just inside, and secondary 24-hour markers towards the dial center, where we find almost a syringe-esque lume handset. And there also is a bit of multi-texture matte and glossy sector effect here, which is also going to allow it to really change in different lighting conditions, and I think just gives a little bit more compared to the other two models that we just looked at. Now, by taking this basic military design Hamilton originally used in watches designed for military service and upgrading and enhancing the look as Hamilton has here, we have a piece that does not present an aggressive look in the slightest, but instead looking like a tool watch with a solid level of refinement and versatility. And while again, this dial isn't head and shoulders above the other two, it is just a bit better in terms of the blend of textures and quality of the printing, though the lume isn't quite as strong as the other two watches. So that is an important note if you are looking for illuminating material here. Though besides the dial on these watches, what really sets the price of a watch at an affordable perspective especially is going to be the movement, and that is pretty true here with these three. In this Orient, we have the in-house, yes, in-house, F6722. So it's a 21,600 vibration per hour, 3 Hz caliber with hacking and hand winding functionality and a 40-hour power reserve. While these certainly aren't the industry's most beautiful calibers, they tend to be highly durable, they're reliable while keeping reasonable time at a stated -15 to +25 seconds a day out of the box. Not bad at all for the money. Still, at this price point, getting an in-house caliber is pretty impressive and something you'll really only see from Japanese watch brands like Orient and Seiko for the most part, as the other two watches run on the help of third-party calibers. Sliding over to the Laco Augsburg, we mentioned earlier that this watch was essentially the same as some of the Fliegers from Laco priced at around $1,000, and the big difference is going to be with the movement here. So what we have housed within here is a Miota 821A. So this is really interesting inclusion, as the majority of European watch brands and even Laco most often favors third-party options from Switzerland from brands like Etta or Sellita, but Laco has clearly moved here to bring in this Flieger style to a more affordable price point. Miota's 821A, viewed under the sapphire caseback, is essentially a Miota 8215, but with just a bit more to the decoration, and this one does feature hacking functionality as well, which is a nice thing to see. In terms of spec, this automatic caliber beats away just like the Orient at 21,600 vibrations per hour or 3 Hertz, has a 42-hour power reserve, and has the largest range of deviation, so -20 to +40 seconds a day. That considered, this one is running much more efficiently than that, but still anecdotal evidence can't really be used as an end-all be-all. Now, compared to the other two watches, the Hamilton Khaki Field Auto offers probably the biggest leap forward of any of the points of comparison so far across all of these watches, with several tangible benefits in terms of the movement here. Now, the automatic movement is the ETA C07111, which Hamilton calls the H10. Now, this is their more entry-level automatic movement. It's viewed beneath the exhibition caseback, and this caliber, which is derived from the ETA 28242, isn't highly finished, but does feature a nice-looking rotor with Hamilton's signature and a few examples of machine-finished movement decoration. So this H10 caliber is essentially the Powermatic 80 movement used throughout Swatch Group's brands, with an extended 80-hour power reserve accomplished by reducing the beat rate from 28,800 vibrations per hour down to 21,600 vibrations per hour or 3 Hertz, and really just making better use of the energy from that mainspring to squeeze out an 80-hour power reserve. And that is a real and useful benefit compared to these other two watches. So definitely looking at this, you're doubling up what is being seen from the other two offerings. However, this watch does not feature regulator pins as a side note, so servicing and regulating might be a bit of a challenge compared to the other two, but the accuracy I find regularly is clocking in the single digits for these. So with this better regulation typically coming from Hamilton and the double of the power reserve compared to the other two watches, this caliber is pretty significant in its upgrade for a relatively small increase price, especially over that Laco in particular. Okay, so now that we've went through all the high-level differences, I think it's important just to recap and maybe just point out some things to consider if you are looking at each one of these watches, which one might be the best for you. Starting with the Orient, I think at the end of the day, price is going to be a driving factor, and if that is the #1 driving factor, then the Orient makes the most sense. The difference here is you are talking about a general range where $250 to $600 is a lot different than, say, $500 to $3,000, that you'll kind of see diminishing returns in that range. Here, it's a little bit different, but the Orient is really delivering, I think, a really solid package. You're getting a nice in-house caliber in here that usually is going to perform with great reliability and also doing it with some great accuracy at that for an entry-level movement. Also getting a nice water resistance rating of 100 meters, screw-down crown, a lot to like there, but you aren't getting the same advantages of different case sizes to choose from, and this is the biggest of the bunch here for 42 millimeters, and does wear pretty true to that case dimension when having it on the wrist. But say you're just trying to get into the world of Flieger style watches and you don't want to maybe sample with something that's really expensive and just want to test your taste, this might be the better one to go for. That said, when looking at the Laco, much of those ideas about the Orient in terms of being a great way to get a taste into this world, you can do that here with Laco, but also get some actual brand DNA and brand equity that goes right in line with Flieger style watches, as this was one of the original 5 that were producing them during World War II. Laco, of course, being a very different brand today, but in terms of what you're able to get here with this Miota caliber inside, pretty attractive price point. Getting sapphire crystal on both the front and the back, you are getting a Miota movement, which is probably the #1 downside of this, but is also why this price is so appetizing in general. And you also are getting hacking, which is a nice upgrade when looking at these entry-level Miota movements. Lume here is also very good as well, and I think legibility is probably the best on this, and you're also with the crystal getting kind of the clarity of a mineral crystal with the scratch resistance of a sapphire here. So in terms of just versatility as well as legibility, if that's something you care about, I think the Laco definitely wins in this department. But since this Laco is getting a little bit closer to that of the Hamilton, I don't think the same value is here compared to the Orient, but still relatively good value here. And now for the Hamilton. So again, this is kind of not apples to apples. This isn't really as much of a pilot style watch more than it is a field watch rather than a Flieger watch. But in general, I think what someone would look for when looking at this timepiece, very much the same type of individual. You're getting some rich military history in Hamilton and what they were designing, but different way compared to that of Laco. And in terms of finish, I think you are seeing a bit of elevation with the dial here. Lume is not as good as the other watches mentioned, so that is a bit of a bummer when you are paying a bit more. But the design style, very flattering, nice legibility, and is a watch that I think would work in a variety of environments. You're getting some nice nice case flexibility there, just like that Laco, so different case options as well. The 38 is going to work closer to a 39 millimeter in actuality, but I think this is going to work on a wide variety of wrists. And then also, I think the number one thing for the Hamilton and why it's so great, you're getting a Swiss-made movement in here with an 80-hour power reserve and pretty much a set and forget it type of just format. This is a great everyday watch for around that $500–600 range, and I think there's good reason why this is one of the leaders when looking at an entry-level Swiss watch and doing it in flying colors with great versatility. But all right, guys, that is my overview of these three pieces. What are your thoughts? So of these three watches, price and everything else included, which one would you go for? I'd love to see those comments down below. If you did enjoy this video, you like these comparisons, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Also make sure to take part in the giveaway, so definitely double hit that subscribe. Actually just hit it once, because I think if you hit it twice, you automatically unsubscribe, so don't do that, but hit it once, subscribe to the channel if you're not, so you can stay up to date with the announcement for that giveaway. Fill out the form, follow all the instructions, head to teddybaldassarre.com as well, so you can enter. Also, if you are in the market for any of these watches, want some more information, I've done deeper dive reviews of all three of these timepieces, so I can link to those in the description, as well as a place to buy, teddybaldassarre.com, as we sell all of these as an authorized dealer. Great peace of mind, full factory warranty for all of these products, so you're good to go if anything bad happens to them. A really reliable place to purchase them, and does help us out in creating more content like this as well. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.